Welcome to my delegate report for the 117th National Baha'i Convention. I'm Jim Fischer. I'll begin with a prayer. O my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. Baha'u'llah. These comments you're going to hear are recollections of me and some other delegates, have not been approved for reprinting or quoting. It's like a pilgrim's note, interesting, but not necessarily accurate. Unit 17 is 6 clusters. Starting from the top, northern Delaware, my little pointer is pointing at it, upper Delmarva, central Delmarva, all on the eastern shore. And on the western shore, we have the cluster known as Western Shore and the Prince George's and St. Mary's Charles. And in Unit 17, as of this past Rizwan, there are 10 assemblies, shown by the purple squares, and 11 groups shown by the green circles. This data came from the map app in my profile. Everybody has a profile. I'll show you where that button is. You can make these maps. Here's the assemblies and groups in our bigger area, and the DC area is rich in Baha'i resources. So if you want to find the articles, the videos, the audios about the National Convention, you go to www.baha'i.us, you log in with your Baha'i credentials, and you'll see this splash page. In the upper right-hand corner is a button called Profile. If you push that once, you'll see this information. Then if you click on My Profile, you'll find the information the National Center has about you, but you'll also find a map. And if you poke at the buttons on that map enough, you can create very interesting maps of not only your location and your cluster and your unit and your region, but any combination of those for any part of the United States. At the top of the login page, there's a banner that will stream a slideshow. And when it gets to the third slide, this picture comes up about the convention. And this button here, Coverage from the American Baha'i, I'm going to push on it. When you click on it like that, you get this page. And it has, on the left-hand side, the 10 articles about the convention with pictures. At the very top, there's a Flickr button. If you push that, you'll see several hundred photographs from the convention. My presentation is 95% those pictures. I have a couple I took myself. And then on the right-hand side, there are videos, each about an hour long, of the Secretary's report, Treasurer's report, and the presentation on Huquq'Allah, which you can watch. Down here is a button to get National's annual report that is printed as paper, but if you push this button, you'll get a PDF download of that annual report. The rest of the right column is the 22 audio tracks, which are all comments from delegates this year. No comments from the counselors are recorded this year. The National Convention has 4 purposes. First, to elect the National Assembly. Second, to arrive at full and complete knowledge of the current conditions, problems, and possibilities of the faith in the country. My summary is where we are. Third, to give the incoming National Assembly the benefit of the collective wisdom, guidance, and constructive suggestions of the assembled delegates. My summary, where we could go. And fourth, to contribute to the unity in spirit and action of the entire Baha'i community, which must include the delegate reports back home like today. This year, for the third year, the National Center staff held Zoom meetings prior to the convention to familiarize new delegates with convention procedures and alert veterans like myself to changes. It's quite a good system. You don't have to be shocked if there's changes when you show up. You know about it now in advance. This is what registration looked like last year. I don't have a picture this year. You get your badge, and that says I'm not only from Unit 17, but that I live in Greenbelt, Maryland, and your delegate number. And this is in alphabetical order by last name from A to Z. So every year it's like different, depends on who's the delegates. This year there were 2 gift books. Baha'i World, volume 35 has come out, and this 1/4-inch thick booklet by Paul Lample titled In Pursuit of a More Superb Mission, and the fine print, I'll read it, exploring a framework for the elimination of racial prejudice in America. You will hear more about this topic. You might want to get one of these. Delegates stay in Skokie, Illinois at the Doubletree by Hilton. Picture from their webpage. I put a little heart on the top floor, this pretty colored conference room. That is where the delegate deepening program is held on the first morning. There's a shuttle bus every day to take us from the Doubletree in Skokie to the House of Worship here on Lake Michigan and back in the evening. It's about 5 miles. This is the complete list of this year's 171 delegates from A, Susan Abel, to Z, Ray Zimmerman. There's 4 columns here. When you get the video later, you can probably spend all day reading this if you want and see who you know. There's always 2 counselors present at the convention. This year, it was Sonia Heron and Billy Silva. They are present in all the sessions. So Thursday, April 24th, the first day of the convention, 9 a.m., the preparation session at the hotel, onto the shuttle buses to go to the House of Worship for lunch, and then 2 p.m., a devotional program, and 2:45, the convention opens in Foundation Hall with the seating of delegates, which means roll call, election of officers, organization of the convention, which is a bit complicated, takes quite a while, the reading of the Rizwan message, consultation on the message. That is a 12-hour day. The delegate preparation session held in the hotel in that top floor to help the delegates better understand the purpose of the convention and how to do their part. This year, guided by the counselors, we studied a compilation, I had never seen this one before, on the National Spiritual Assembly, Baha'i Electoral Process and Consultation. The first quote is, "The spiritual assemblies to be established in this age of God, this holy century, have, it is indisputable, had neither peer nor likeness in the cycles gone before. For those assemblages that wielded power were based on the support of mighty leaders of men, while these assemblies are based on the support of the beauty of Abha. The defenders and patrons of those other assemblages were either a prince or a king or a chief priest or the mass of the people. But these spiritual assemblies have for their defender, their supporter, their helper, their inspirer, the omnipotent Lord," from Abdu'l-Baha. So I have 3 slides here on highlights from the sharings. We will study the paragraphs of the letter at tables, and then after several hours of that, really, there was an opportunity for tables to share highlights. And so these are things I heard people say. I might have thought them also, but generally I heard them. Neither the National Assembly nor delegates are responsible to constituencies. Both are responsible for their decisions to God. We elect the National Spiritual Assembly and then trust them. The old world model, self-selected individuals try to convince the population that their agenda will solve the problems. The new world, we have maximum freedom of choice. Those elected didn't seek the position, but have the skills and mindset to address the needs. Most of these sharings also relate to regional and local Baha'i elections. So here's kind of a voting methodology that I heard. Know the purpose of the institution you're electing first. Once you know its purpose, then you'll have a better feeling for the skills of the people who you might want to vote for that institution. Start with a big pool, all the people eligible for election. So at the national level, anyone in the country that is in good standing, age 21 and above. Then those who you are acquainted with, either personally or by reputation, and then those with unquestioned loyalty, selfless devotion, a well-trained mind, recognized ability, mature experience, narrowing it down, and then select with consideration to such other factors as age distribution, ethnic diversity, and gender. This preparation is done year-round. Now, thinking about the local level or the regional level, so we can make the feast the place for rich consultation so the community knows who is doing what in the community, and we can help people develop habits to read Baha'i publications to learn what others are doing in other communities within our unit or our region or our community. So we get to know each other through service also, so get involved so you meet other people that way. And the third highlight, pitfalls. Some of this I had not really thought about before. Pitfalls to be avoided during the election process. So there's three. Allowing ourselves to be drawn into prevailing norms of society. No surprise, we are immersed in a sea of notions that are antithetical to the spirit of the faith, and it is hard to stay dry in this sea. The second pitfall, forming constituencies of like-minded believers to bring pressure on elected assemblies. I had not experienced this, but apparently it's not uncommon because it was the first thing that the counselors talked about. An example being bringing petitions to the local assembly that the 100 undersigned people want the local assembly to do this or that. That's bringing pressure. So you could do research, gather data, but bringing pressure is overboard. And third, hesitancy in deciding who to vote for. Hesitancy can really relate to it. It can result in not voting because people would say, I don't know who to vote for. I don't know anybody. This is an appropriate quote from the House of Justice. All that any voter can do is to vote for those among the believers who are known to him, either personally or by reputation, turning to God to produce ultimately the best result for the faith. So that's the end of the preparation session. We're on the shuttle bus, arriving at the house of worship. First, there's a devotional program upstairs in the auditorium. Then down to Foundation Hall for the organization of the convention. Only delegates this year, no guests, no delegate guest. Actually, the National Assembly had some guests of their own. Both counselors sit in the front row. They're always present. And all National Spiritual Assembly members are present because this is a consultation with the National Assembly. First order of business, election of the convention officers. An elected chair was David Young from Oregon and Secretary Muin Afnani from California. At the lower left, I have incidental but consequential. Note that 3 members of the incoming National Assembly were delegates this year. Generally, it's been more like 4 or 5, 3 this year. That was Muin Afnani, David Young, and June Thomas. To be an officer, you have to be a delegate. And the delegates seem to feel that if they're also members of the National Assembly, perhaps they are more aware of what's going on and can better serve as officers of the convention. So as soon as Dr. Young was announced as the elected chair, the first words that he said had to do with the September 30th, 2024 letter from the National Assembly. And there will be much more on that later on. So then the chair names the team to develop a letter from the convention to the House of Justice. And these 4 people, they didn't know they're on the list until they heard their name. I've never been called, but that would be quite a job. And they did a fabulous job this year, creating a 2-page letter. Never seen such a thorough letter before. They have the whole convention to write that thing in their spare time. And then the convention decides on its procedures. And I put this in the corner. It's like it's small, but it's not. It's so big that it would take multiple pages, but I'm just not going to go into it. So agenda. The National proposes an agenda, but often there will be modifications from the floor that we really need to talk about this additional topic. Can you squeeze it in? And time limits. So when you get up to speak, do you have 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 3.5 minutes? It's an important number. It really asking you to be more organized, perhaps, in what you're preparing to say. Reporting election results. So this is when you hear the first 9 names after the election, do you want to hear the 10th name also, or the 10th through the 18th name? What do you want? And that can turn into an hour of discussion if it really is questioned. It's this year it was the first 9 names, and that's it. And the last on my list here, procedure for consultation. When I first became a delegate almost 20 years ago, Robert's Rules of Order were the way, and that has changed. That's no longer the procedure for consultation, and more it is left to the chair to read the collective mind of the delegates and act on what the feeling is that the majority is wanting to do. Visit to the National Archives. Every year, a special exhibit is put together by the archives, including sacred relics, original letters, and photographs. It's on display in the archives, which is on the lower level of the temple outside Foundation Hall. It's a teeny tiny room. You get about 5 or 6 people in there, and it's full. You're on your own during breaks to find the room, and if there's a line, maybe come back later. You recall that we're raising money for a permanent place for the archives, and the place they had picked, the engineering people got in there and they discovered the building wasn't big enough for what they had to put in with regard to air handling. And so that building was dropped. And what we learned this year from the printed annual report on page 163, if you want to go to it, is that construction plans have been submitted for a property in nearby Wheeling, Illinois, to house the majority of the National Baha'i Archives collection. This was not announced from the floor. I had to find it in the printed report. And it also said that construction was anticipated to start in the summer of 2025, which is about now. So hopefully that is underway. The cornerstone, symbolically laid by Abdu'l-Baha in 1912 at the ceremony to dedicate the temple site, is located just a few steps outside Foundation Hall. When it's lunchtime, you can pull up a chair and have your lunch with the cornerstone, and people do that. It's right there. The reading of the 2025 Rizwan message from the House of Justice, followed by consultation. Someone said, this is how we meet the House of Justice, through its letters, through its writing. Imagine that the letter has been read, and now the counselors are given an opportunity to comment. They get to comment first, and then the delegates. Counselor Hearn is speaking. She says, this is the voice of the last refuge for a tottering civilization. She said, when we read the Rizwan message, do we really read it? She says, every year when the Rizwan message comes, I don't feel ready. She suggests try reading last year's letter and this year's letter side by side. She asks, what was asked of us last year? How did we do? Where do we need to go? So she offers reflections on our experience with last year's message. Here's a quote from last year's message. With every passing day, we see the condition of the world grow more desperate. The House called us to build communities that offer hope in place of despair. She asked, what was our response? The letter asked, sustained rapid rise in the number, committing to the success of this work. She asked, did that number grow? What obstacles were overcome? Has the number of souls that we are engaged with increased in the past year? If not, where we live, where is this happening? I've underlined words that relate to learning. Where is it happening? The letter said, all must surge, but the youth must soar. She asked, how were youth able to reach out to their peers? Who has this experience? Another word relating to learning. She had this quote, which relates to teaching. When a man has found the joy of life in one place, he returns to that same spot to find more joy. When a man has found gold in a mine, he returns again to that mine to dig for more gold. Abdu'l-Baha. Now the counselor is going to comment on this year's letter. I've outlined this year's letter on the left-hand side with the first few words of each of the 5 paragraphs of the letter. So let's review that first. First paragraph, with but a year remaining before the first phase of the 9-year plan concludes. Second paragraph, the process of growth continues to advance. Third paragraph, meanwhile, grassroots engagement with society has taken remarkable strides forward. Fourth paragraph, the 9-year plan relies on a vast global process of learning. We're going to hear a lot about learning. And final paragraph, against the gloom of a stormy sky, how bright the light that gleams. A characteristic stands out, the capacity for learning. Counselor Hearns points out, just as we've read, that there is just 1 year remaining in the first phase of the 9-year plan. The vision offered by the faith is filling more hearts with hope. She gives this analogy. If you are one body, this would be the body of mankind, then what affects one part affects the whole. Are the people around us feeling more hope? Where? Have you seen marvelous breakthroughs? If you have you disseminated those insights elsewhere? So if you learned something, did you report it? Any local examples? What local activities are you engaged in to release these energies? How are our local activities benefiting from the process of learning? Did we find out something that was learned somewhere else and we apply it where we live? She says, getting connected to the learning process may be simple. And I remember being at a meeting years ago with a member of the House of Justice, and I asked, how do we know what we learned? And he said, you read the letters from the House of Justice. So that's one way. Building havens, that's from the Rizwan letter. Humanity needs havens now. Are we aware of expectations for advancement in our region or area? So this is goals. What are nearby goals that we could be aware of, we could help with? And all day, every day, calling on the concourse on high. Okay, I put up the word segue in the lower right-hand corner. That means that when I go to the next chart, it's going to be like entirely different topic. So be ready. Here we go. In March of this year, more than a month before the convention, I got an email from Eric Johnson and Danita Brown on the subject National Convention Artistic Devotional Program. And they said, in response to many suggestions from delegates over the years for there to be a more prominent artistic and musical component to the National Convention, that the National Assembly is planning for a special arts devotional to be held on the first evening. The desire is to have artistic contributions by delegates representing the 4 original regions outlined in the tablets of the Divine Plan. That was Central, Northeastern, Southern, that's us, and Western. And that they have been asked to organize a 15-minute presentation from the Southern states. And if you want to get involved, come to the Zoom meeting. And I did. So on the right-hand side were our fearless leaders, Eric Johnson from North Carolina, Danita Brown from Georgia, and Adalia Ellis from South Carolina, with lots of support from the cast, which were the other delegates from the southern states. This thing took on a life of its own, resulting in a script, a practice session on Zoom, another practice session in the House of Worship, and a role for every delegate from the southern states if they wanted one. And the storyline for our 15 minutes recalls the time of mass teaching in the 1960s. Some of us were around in those days. Here's the script. The teaching teams inside Foundation Hall, some of the delegates, knock on the 3 entrance doors and find seekers waiting to come in, other delegates. They lead them into Foundation Hall singing in the prayer room and up to the stage where a fireside is ready to start. The voice of William Sears is heard, prayers are said, people are drumming. Then participants bring out photos of dear friends who have passed to the Abha Kingdom, walk through the audience saying their names, and hand out photos of Louis Gregory with the prayer for the southern states printed on the back, all the while singing We Are Soldiers. And that's done in 15 minutes. So here we are. We've already let the seekers in, and the fireside is taking place on the stage. They said, bring your teaching book from the early days. I have a green one too. The southern states on the screen behind us. You will recall that in 1997, when the first election for the regional councils took place, that this was the size of the southern region. It went all the way to Amarillo, Texas, and all the way to Key West. And we're up here in the upper right-hand corner. We were remembering that. This isn't the whole crowd. Some of them are in the back, and now they've brought out their pages with the pictures of those who have passed on and are circumambulating Foundation Hall. Here you see in the back of Foundation Hall the parade of Southern delegates with their pictures. Others are passing out the Louis Gregory photos. Now we're all singing We Are Soldiers. This was my page with photos of dear friends who have passed to the Abha Kingdom. I thought of Jim Sturdivant, who was at the very first meeting I ever went to in 1971 in Tacoma Park. And on that day, he adopted me, and we became collaborators for 40 years, mostly in Greenbelt. I thought of Sarah Pereira, who was the speaker at that first meeting I ever went to in 1971. Albert James, who was taught the faith by Louis Gregory in Tennessee as a young man. He and his wife Ruth moved to Baltimore. They bought property in Howard County in the 40s. They were the first Baha'is in Howard County, Maryland. They taught their neighbors. They formed the first local assembly in the early 60s. And I thought of Elsie Austin, who had this fabulous career service to the faith, and in her later days lived in our area, just 2 exits on the Beltway from Greenbelt, and she was like a local person. So this was a great exercise to think of who these people are that were in our life and that we want to remember and connect with. On to Friday morning, the annual reports of the National Assembly Secretary and Treasurer. There's an opportunity for question and answer after each of these reports. Then consultation all day on the movement of clusters, which means advancing clusters from milestone 1, 2, and 3. Learning from the most advanced clusters. Learning shows up so much. Contributing to social transformation. The buses depart 8:45. This is a 12-hour day. Report from the Secretary of the National Assembly. We gain insight into the thinking of the National Assembly. I'm going to play a little bit of video for you from his talk, but first, going back to December 30th, 2021, the House of Justice wrote, I'm going to read this, and you'll remember it, the plan that will shortly commence, which would be at Rizwan 2022, the first major undertaking in a sacred 25-year venture, generational in its scope and significance, will make demands of the individual believer, the community, and the institutions reminiscent of the demands that the Guardian made of the Baha'i world at the outset of the 10-year crusade. If, by the grace of Almighty God, the Friends should succeed in reaching the heights of heroism to which they are now summoned, history will assuredly pay tribute to their actions in terms no less glowing than those with which it honors the glorious deeds that decorate the annals of the first century of the formative age. When Mr. Bowers speaks, he assumes that we've already read the annual report from the National Assembly, the printed document, the 184-page document. So he doesn't have to go into the details. And we would also have read this, which is on page 3. When you open the cover, this is the beginning of the message from the National Assembly. So I'm going to share it. 3 years have now elapsed since the inauguration of the 9-year plan, the first in a series of world-embracing plans designated by the House of Justice to be focused on a single aim, the release of the society-building power of the faith in ever greater measures. The work being undertaken in cluster after cluster to create havens of peace for the peoples of the world stands in clear contrast to the forces of disintegration now sweeping through society, and whose ultimate purpose is to prepare humanity for the creation of a new order founded upon the revelation of God for this age. Ours is the task to build communities that offer hope in place of despair, unity in place of conflict. The second paragraph, they immediately start to talk about the September 30th letter last year, which appears in this annual report, starting on page 13, serves as a reminder to the American Baha'i community of the role that our nation is destined to play in the establishment of the Most Great Peace, as well as the critical contribution that we must make to prepare it for the great destiny ordained by Baha'u'llah. Our work essentially is to help to effect a spiritual transformation that will render our country fit for the tasks it must face in the coming generations. So now he's going to speak to this. He speaks for an hour, and I don't have time to share all of it, so I've broken it into what I feel are the most important pieces, and I'll give you that in 2 doses here. The September 30th letter 2024 is the focus. Here it's a 9-page letter, and these are the headers in the letter, the topic areas. I'll read it off. This is a time of great historical consequence for all humanity. Second, America to be the standard bearer. Third, a still more superb mission. Fourth, advancing within an evolving framework. Fifth, a profound alteration of thought. Sixth, the youth must soar. And seventh, through living sacrifice. Mr. Bowers.
To open, if you will, a window into the mind and the heart of your National Spiritual Assembly and our sense together of what this past year has meant, some of its major events, and what we now see as the challenges and the opportunities that are ahead of us. During the course of this presentation, I'll also talk a little bit about the broadcast that we're doing tomorrow, because there are important reasons behind that, and I'll take a minute just for you to understand what it is and why we're doing it at this time. Now, yesterday, the chair of the convention, David Young, mentioned this amazing meeting that we had with a member of the Universal House of Justice. Now, in my time of service on the National Spiritual Assembly, we've actually met with members of the House of Justice on a rather regular basis. Usually once a year or so, sometimes more, we have met with members of the House of Justice. But in all of the other cases that happened, this was at our invitation. So in other words, a House member might be in the United States, and we would say, oh, well, while you're here, can you come and join us and let's consult on a few things. And so very graciously, more often than not, those members would agree, and we had these wonderful meetings. This was the first occasion that we know of, that any of us can remember, where the House of Justice itself designated someone to come and meet with the National Spiritual Assembly. And it was not just the Assembly, but as was said, it was with all 6 members of the Continental Board of Counselors for the Americas who reside in the United States. Now, we did not know in advance what the meeting would be about. It was just the summons, be there, and the counselors be there, and we'll have our emissary, who was Mr. Paul Lample, come and deliver our message on our behalf. Now, I would say the spirit of it can be evoked by this paragraph that dear Sonia Hearn read to us yesterday. And it's from the Rezvan message of last year. And I hope you don't mind, but I think it's worth repeating to set the spirit of the occasion that we had with Mr. Lample. With every passing day, the House of Justice writes, we see too the condition of the world grow more desperate, its divisions more severe. The escalating tensions within societies and between nations affect peoples and places in a myriad ways. This demands from every conscientious soul a response. We are all too aware that the community of the greatest name cannot expect to be unaffected by the travails of society. Yet, though it is affected by these travails, it is not confused by them. It is saddened by humanity's sufferings, but not paralyzed by them. Heartfelt concern must prompt sustained effort to build communities that offer hope in place of despair, unity in place of conflict. So there are these contrasting ideas of, the darkness that is gathering in society, and then these beacons of hope that we're striving to create. Now, the United States, as we well know, has a very special role to play in the ushering in of the most great peace. Friends, many of us have been Baha'is our entire lives, or for many years at least. And perhaps sometimes it can become something we almost take for granted, but it's a stunning thing to realize that the Blessed Beauty himself designated the United States of America to usher in the most great peace. The Blessed Beauty himself. This is what Abdu'l-Baha said. So it's an amazing thing to think about that. Now, at the time, when the Blessed Beauty must have done it, during his lifetime, obviously, the United States was by no means one of the great powers of the world. Yet somehow, Baha'u'llah saw this great future for the United States. And of course, a few years after his ascension, the realization, the emergence of America onto the world stage began to take effect, beginning in 1899, which became known thenceforward as the American century. Remember, this was the century that began right after the close of the Spanish-American War, and was the same year, by the way, that the first group of Western pilgrims made it to the Holy Land to attain the presence of Abdu'l-Baha. So these two things coincided with each other. So it's a remarkable thing. But just like Iran as the Guardian very clearly explained to us. Is my time out? Is that what's going on? No. Can I have 4 minutes? Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you. Compassion, right? This is a moment for compassion. Just as the Guardian explained, Iran was chosen to be the home of the twin manifestations of God and the birthplace of the promised revelation of all time. And these were the first people to be impacted by that revelation, but not by virtue of any cultural superiority on the part of the Persian people, but rather precisely for the opposite reason. By reason of its social and political decadence, moral decadence, was it chosen. But why? So that it could stand in contrast to the transformative power of the revelation of God to change the hearts of humanity. Now, for the same reason, this country was chosen as the seat of the cradle of the administrative order and for this great destiny. Again, not by virtue of inherent superiority, cultural advancement, or anything like that, but rather, as the Guardian explained, because of the patent evils that are endemic in our society. As Dr. Young mentioned yesterday, the moral laxity, the political corruption, and above all, the ingrained racial prejudice which exists until today. It's for this reason, but again, so that the power of the revelation of Baha'u'llah would stand out in contrast and prove its potential to transform the entire world. This is the reason that the United States was chosen. So the emissary of the Universal House of Justice came to us and essentially had two messages. One was that the House of Justice keenly felt that there is a storm gathering on the horizon of humanity that will affect all the people of the world, but to which the United States will not be immune. Things probably will get darker and more challenging over the course of coming years, perhaps even more so than anything in this country we have yet experienced. But the other was the reminder of the special role that the American Baha'i community must play towards the realization of America's destiny. So America has a destiny, but there's a contribution that is indispensable that the Baha'is must make to that destiny for it to be realized. Mr. Lampel quoted this passage, which I'll quote for you. "The range of your future achievements," Abdu'l-Baha wrote, and is being quoted by Shoghi Effendi, "still remains undisclosed. I fervently hope that in the near future, the whole earth may be stirred and shaken by the results of your achievements. The Almighty will no doubt grant you the help of His grace, will invest you with the tokens of His might, and will endue your souls with the sustaining power of His Holy Spirit. Be not concerned," and this is Abdu'l-Baha, "be not concerned with the smallness of your numbers, neither be oppressed by the multitude of an unbelieving world. Exert yourselves. Your mission is unspeakably glorious. Should success crown your enterprise, America will assuredly evolve into a center from which waves of spiritual power will emanate, and the throne of the kingdom of God will, in the plenitude of its majesty and glory, be firmly established." Now, this is the promise that Abdu'l-Baha gave, if we do our job. Remember, if we do what we're supposed to do. So, Mr. Lampel had to ask this question of us. We see that the old world order is continuing its decline, but are the efforts of the National Assembly and of the American Baha'i community commensurate with the urgency of the hour? This was the question of the House of Justice. Are we sufficiently aware of what is coming and how we need to prepare for it? Are we doing everything we can now to fulfill this promise that is given in the Baha'i writings? So it was, you can imagine the moment, when this member of the House of Justice was asking this question openly of us. Now, he was very clear to say the message of the House was not that we're doing anything wrong. We're not off track, we're not off base, we're not doing the wrong plan or anything like that. It's just a matter of, are we doing the plan with the level of energy and commitment that is required given what else is going on around us? He reminded us also of the stages in the development of the American Baha'i community that have led up until this moment. In the advent of divine justice, there are very important statements that are made by Shoghi Effendi about those stages of development. In the first place, he talks about the need at that time of history for the American Baha'is to scatter far and wide. Now, it's not to say that there was no teaching on the home front or there were no home front teaching goals, but the primary sphere of focus and activity was the international pioneering field. For most of the ministry, in fact, probably all of the ministry of Shoghi Effendi, this was the case. But he talked about a time when that mission would be over. He also said at that time, this is of course in the 1930s, that as yet the American Baha'i community was too small to have the impact on society that is described in the statements of Abdu'l-Baha. But that the time would come when that would no longer be the case and we could have that impact. So now if we move forward a century, we see that in 2016, on the anniversary of the first of the tablets of the Divine Plan, 100th anniversary, the Universal House of Justice, in a message to the Baha'is of the world, indicated that, actually to the Baha'is of North America, pardon me, indicated that the era of international pioneering essentially had come to a close. Now, it doesn't mean that there are no pioneering goals, but this major focus of opening new territories and countries and so on, and said very clearly, now what you can do is you can assist your now well-established sister communities around the world to advance their respective plans. But essentially that part is over. And then, of course, in its November 28th message of 2023, on the Day of the Covenant, the House of Justice said to the entire Baha'i world that the Baha'i community now had come to the point, both in America and elsewhere, that it could now have the impact on society that had been envisioned in the writings of the faith. As they put it, that time has now come. So a new chapter then was opening up and was reminiscent of a statement that the Guardian himself made and reads as follows from the Advent of Divine Justice. And who knows but that when this colossal task has been accomplished, that is to say the international work, a greater, still more superb mission, incomparable in its splendor, and foreordained for them by Baha'u'llah, may not be thrust upon them. The glories of such a mission are of such dazzling splendor, the circumstances attending it so remote, and the contemporary events with the culmination of which it is so closely knit in such a state of flux that it would be premature to attempt at the present time any accurate delineation of its features. Suffice it to say that out of the turmoil and tribulations of these latter years, opportunities undreamt of will be born, and circumstances unpredictable created that will enable, nay, impel, the victorious prosecutors of Abdu'l-Baha's plan to add, through the part they will play in the unrolling of the New World Order, fresh laurels to the crown of their servitude to the threshold of Baha'u'llah. So friends, again, that time has now come. Now, we may not have yet reached the climax of that time, but this era now surely is upon us from everything we have read in the statements of the Universal House of Justice. So the issue, friends, that was presented to us, basically there were two challenges that we were given as an assembly. One, to assist the friends not to succumb to the divides, the partisanship, the tensions, the hatreds, all of the things that we see, the materialism, all the things going on in our society, but rather to stay focused, stay the course, stay focused on advancing the plan and commit ourselves, heart and soul, to the work of the cause. This was the first request of the House of Justice. The second request of the House of Justice was, of course, to advance the plan with all the means at our disposal and to have the friends really to understand its indispensability and its importance. So we had this meeting with Mr. Lampel. It lasted a day and a half. The consultation was a day and a half. So one can imagine at the end of it, how we all felt, because every member of the Assembly, all the counselors were there. I think I can speak for us all when I say that we felt that we were truly being called by the Universal House of Justice together, that is, our institutions, but also the community, to an entirely new level of functioning, commensurate with the needs of the hour. And the first decision that we made, we met with him, we wrote to the House of Justice a long letter summarizing, here's what we think your member said to us, is this what he said, and do we get it, do we have it? And so the House soon responded, yes, that's exactly it. And then they said, but write to us after you've done a thorough examination of all of your plans, write to us and give us a chance to comment on that. I'll get to that later, but that's what we also decided to do. But another very important decision was that we thought, well, everyone in the United States Baha'i community should hear what we heard. The fruit of that is the September 30 letter. That was really a reflection of that meeting that we had with a member of the House of Justice and with the counselors. Now, it doesn't mention the member of the House of Justice, but everything from that meeting is there. And we hope that it has been helpful to you on both counts. That is, to help in your conversations and with others to navigate these difficult times, to think about them, but also to recommit ourselves to the advancement of the plan.
He speaks for an hour, so I've given you a 16-minute snapshot, and now here is a 12-minute snapshot to complete this thought.
Let me return now, please, to the current conditions in the United States. We all remember this landmark message that was issued to the Baha'is of America by our beloved Universal House of Justice in July of 2020. This was in response, the proximate response was to the savage murder of George Floyd. But that really was the final straw, because there had been a string of violence and an overall sense that we were going backward in this country from advances that we had made. And so the nation, or a big part of the nation, rose up in these demonstrations and created what the House of Justice described in its opening paragraph as a moment of historic portent for the United States, in which the House of Justice also expressed the hope that it would indeed mark a step forward. But in the next clause, or the next paragraph, the House of Justice says something a little bit different, and it seems prescient now when we read it again. Sadly, however, writes the House of Justice, your nation's history reveals that any significant progress towards racial equality has invariably been met by countervailing processes, overt or covert, that served to undermine the advances achieved and to reconstitute the forces of oppression by other means. Now, friends, I hope that I don't need to go on about what we feel now that's going on in the United States. It seems like there's a concerted effort to roll back certain advances that have been made. But we feel very strongly, friends, that the way forward on this, just as the House of Justice very clearly said in that same letter, is through the instruments provided by the plan. Now, your National Spiritual Assembly feels passionately about the issue of racial justice. Passionately. It's probably the one theme that is more prevalent in our discussions than any other that we have. And we feel that it is just as relevant today as when the Guardian first wrote The Advent of Divine Justice 90 years ago. We believe that to resolve it requires intentionality. It won't happen by accident. It requires consciousness. It won't happen by osmosis. We have to think about this. We have to learn about this. But we also have to apply the same evolving framework of learning to this issue as to any other issue in the plan. Now, among the things that you received as delegates was this wonderful little booklet maybe by Mr. Paul Lample, towards a still more superb mission. And in it, Mr. Lample is not proposing solutions to the issue of race. What he is proposing, though, is that a framework of learning about this over the course of time, just as we have applied in everything else, will be the way forward for us. And he, of course, brings to this thesis the support of the guidance that we have from the Universal House of Justice. So we have to learn to do this together. We must build a sense of collective learning. Now, in some places, we can see that advances have been made. But in many places, we don't feel like our Baha'i community has moved very much yet. It doesn't change what we have to do. And what we hope this weekend is that instead of saying, well, it's not happening in my cluster, let's ask it as a question. Where is it happening, and what can we learn from that? that helps me when I go back to my cluster. Because we recognize the truth of it, but it's just a question of now, don't focus on what we're not doing, focus on where it's happening and what we're learning from that, and then see how that might apply when we go back to our communities. And that sense of collective learning is a way that, again, like these molecules of oxygen, we won't just have stuff happening, we'll create a flow, we'll create a river that will change the landscape of the United States. So we have in the end, friends, this statement from the House of Justice from this year: against the gloom of a stormy sky, how bright the light that gleams from your devoted efforts. Even as the tempest rages in the world, the havens that will shelter humanity are being built in countries, regions, and clusters. But there is much to do. Each national community has its own expectations for the progress to be made during this, the plan's opening phase. Time is passing. Beloved friends and promulgators of the divine teachings and champions of the blessed beauty, your efforts are needed now. So there's this urgent need now to advance our clusters. But let's also be sure that with the tests that are happening, there will be a new level of appreciation and receptivity on the part of our fellow citizens as well. We can be sure of this. Someone even mentioned yesterday that receptivity now is just off the charts. Well, it's true, and it's going to get even more. They're going to have to create new charts. It's as if, friends, the great parade of American society is turning a corner. They're heading straight for us. They're heading straight for us. Now, we have to be ready for that and be able to nurture as much as we can this interest in new solutions, new ideas, new principles that are adequate to the challenges of the time. Now, let me say a little bit, I've got a little bit more to go, but let me say a little bit about this broadcast tomorrow. It's in that spirit that the broadcast is taking place. So if you look at the September 30 letter, this was a letter to the American Baha'is. But one of the interesting things about that, and one of the delegates mentioned it yesterday, that some of the greatest feedback we've had on that letter has been from people who are not Baha'is. In fact, when we were in Dallas, a gentleman, not a Baha'i Christian, he defined himself as a church-going Christian, white guy, maybe 50 or so. I don't want to insult him if he is much younger than that, but something like that. And he said he had read this September 30 letter, and he approached Robert Henderson, and then later he approached me. So I'll tell the one that happened to me. As he walked up to me in this gathering that we were having that he attended, and he said, "You're a member of the National Assembly?" "Yeah." "And did you have anything to do with this September 30 letter?" I said, "Yeah, I was involved in that." And I didn't know what was coming. And so he then kind of whipped out the letter from his pocket. And it was dog-eared and highlighted and underlined and all these circles and all this. And I remember thinking to myself, gee, I wish the Baha'is would pay attention to our letters like this guy did. That was my first, pardon me, but that was my first instinct. But he kind of waved it in front of me, said, Mr. Bowers, I only have one criticism of this letter. So I kind of braced myself. All right, what is it? You sent this to the Baha'is. This should have been sent to every household in America. It's Christian, from Texas, and a white guy. Some of my best friends are white guys, don't get me wrong. But it's not the profile that you would expect. But they're out there, friends. That's what's really important about this. Now, we can expect that a lot of people are not going to be happy with what we do. But we felt that given the times that we live in, it was important now to go to the next level. And that is this live broadcast that you'll see from this dais tomorrow. That is, we've now recast that message using most of the same elements, but we've elaborated certain areas to do in plainer English the message that we gave to the Baha'is. And by that I mean removing references to the tablets of the divine plan and advent of divine justice and so on, because the public doesn't necessarily have an idea what that's all about, but we'll use the concepts from it and concepts from the writings of the Universal House of Justice and so on. And we thought it would be important then to invite the Baha'is to invite their friends to come hear what the national governing body of the Baha'is of the United States has to say about where we are in the United States, what our aspirations are for this country, and what is the way forward for this country. How do we get where we want to go? So that's the subject of the message tomorrow. We thought, well, we could just write another letter and get the Baha'is to give it out and that sort of a thing. We thought, let's do it from the National Convention. And there's a reason for that, because it gives us a chance to talk about the Baha'i political process, as it were. Because we're at an event where we're able to, without criticizing anyone else, contrast our method of election and our method of consultation, our whole idea of governance, with what else is going on in society. So you're participants in this in the sense that you're together with us to help us to illustrate that. And maybe they could have designated one member of the Assembly to do it, but we decided, no, all 9 members of the Assembly will do it. Why? Take a look. Really, I mean, at a time when DEI is under attack and people, Jackie Robinson can't even be remembered. I mean, it's just ridiculous stuff going on. Pardon me, but it's just ridiculous. We are a governing body that is mostly women and mostly people of color. So it's the physical embodiment of everything America should aspire to be. Now, this is the accident of our birth and the result of your election process, but let's not waste that. Let's not waste that and show the country that this can happen. That the people can see that there's something achievable here. Now, what we want to do next year is take it yet another step, which will be to issue a statement to the people of America. And our goal is to have that ready by this time next year. Now, next year is the 250th birthday of the United States. And already there's an emerging discourse about the American narrative. Who are we? Where did we come from? What are we doing? What is our place in the world, in the community of nations? Where do we go from here? How do we get there? How do we transcend all the difficulties? I mean, so this is a very lively debate. Now, people are going to have their narratives. Some of them will be more aligned with us, some will be less aligned with us, but we have a decided advantage here. The narrative we have is given to us by Baha'u'llah. So our narrative is the truth. It is. Now, I don't say that in a sense of superiority or triumphalism, but we can stand behind it because we know the manifestation of God has a vision for humanity and for this country. So we should say what it is. Now, if we do that, we can expect, as I said, some people aren't going to be terribly happy about that. And the more prominent we become, the more that will happen.
We really get this train of thought that goes from the House of Justice through the September 30th letter and through the broadcast that will happen from the National Convention, and now a letter to the citizens of the United States a year from now at Rizwan. Quite a story, and I thought this was very important to understand with relation to the September 30th letter, because we didn't know this background story. So now I'm moving on to the report from the Treasurer. Dr. Henderson, I'm not going to show video here. I'm going to highlight some things he said. He said, when we raise material resources for our faith, we are not raising money to pay the bills. We are raising money to build the kingdom of God on earth. He said, growth involves building capacity for more growth as we look into the future. Contributions versus operating expenses by month. I quote him at the bottom, and I'll point as I read. The red line shows what we are spending. The blue bars below the red line track contributions. And he almost whispers, he says, those don't touch enough. So he's referring to this gap. He says, we are solvent on the first and last days of the year. So you see the first month, the red line and the blue bar touch, their gap opens, and he's projecting that by the last month, which would be off to the right, that we will have hurried up and caught up to meet the $50 million goal, and that those red line and the blue bar will touch again only at the first day and last day of the year. He says, but in the meantime, and that means during the gap, the National Assembly must either borrow at high interest rates, liquidate investments, or rely on loans from Baha'is. And all of that probably costs money. And he says in the lower right, just mitigating the need to borrow would save a lot of money. So it's an encouragement to perhaps more aggressive contributions from the local level to fill this gap during the year, not just at the end. He shows this chart of unrestricted contributions to the National Fund by age group in their 20s and under, in the 30s, in their 40s, their 50s, 60s, and what he termed my people in their 70s and 80s. The quote at the bottom, many of the most generous contributors are now entering retirement, and that suggests fixed income. He says, we are challenged to develop our capacity to fund the operations of the faith from the younger demographic segments of the American Baha'i community. And the last chart from Dr. Henderson. If you want to hear more, and it is always a wonderful presentation, you can hear his full hour presentation on the 2025 National Convention webpage. This was Dr. Henderson's last official act as a member of our National Spiritual Assembly. He then retired after 43 years on the National Assembly. And I offer this blast from the past. I put a QR code, but it's also a link in my invitation for today's presentation. You can hear Dr. Henderson speak a year ago in the 2024 delegate report on the developmental agenda for the funds during the 9-year plan and beyond. And I'll just summarize that as that the National Center working with the World Center is a long-term plan for the development of regional councils, the capabilities of regional councils to respond to anticipated growth. The World Center, which has methodologies for coaching national assemblies that are emerging and developing all over the world, now has brought out a coaching strategy for our own regional councils in the United States, coached from the World Center for development of their capabilities long-term to respond to growth. Now we're on to the Saturday program. This will involve the election of the National Assembly, consultation on educational endeavors in the Training Institute, the town hall broadcast at 4 p.m., presentation of the newly elected National Assembly, and a new agenda item, Dr. Henderson's retirement testimonials, followed by presentation by the Board of Trustees of Hakukala. This was a packed agenda, and the buses did not leave at 8:45. There was some delay to get it all in. The election of the National Assembly. Voting instructions were read. The tellers read quotations about elections. A silent and prayerful atmosphere was established. Once everyone was ready, the convention chair called each delegate alphabetically to place their vote in the clear plexiglass ballot box, literally completely transparent election. Absentee ballots were placed into the box by the chief teller as those absent delegates' names were called, 100% transparent. A standing ovation erupted when voting was complete, a reverent spiritual atmosphere treated by all as sacred. And that atmosphere was continued by the tellers until the counting and report was complete. The Flickr page presented photographs of all 165 delegates voting in person in alphabetical order by last name. And I made a little movie for you. So if you're somewhere else, come to the screen and place your nose right in front of it. I'm going to play a 165-second video of the voting. This is amazing. Susan Abel, it's a silent movie. 171 ballots ready for the chief teller to pick up the box and take it to the room for counting. Such a different process than what we see around us in the US. Group picture. This is also on the national website in the Flickr group. You can spend an hour looking at this, but we won't. Some demographics, age range of delegates. The purple, 1% in the 20s. It'd be nice if that was more. 7% in their 30s, 14% in their 40s, 16% in their 50s, 29% in their 60s. And here's my people, 70s, 30%. And there's even someone or two in their 80s. Number of years served as delegates. So the purple, first year, second year, third year, fourth through ninth year, 10 to 19 years. I'm in this quadrant. And 20 or more years, 6%. Race, ethnicity, this is self-identified data obtained from the registration form. I'll start on the left. White, a third. Persian, a quarter. There's this category called Middle Eastern, 1%. So someone is Middle Eastern but not Persian. Multi-ethnic, 10%. Hispanic or Latin American, 2%. This would underrepresent what is in the national population. Black or African American, 25%. Asian, 2%. That means like two people. And Native American, 1%. That would be like one person. Delegates by gender. Blue is female, green is male. This is a trend, perhaps. There might be some parity achieved in a few years. First-time delegates, green is male, blue is female. And the final statistic, delegates who spoke at National Convention. Looking back 5 years, see the gap of 2 years when we did not have the in-person convention. Blue female, green male. But we're also looking at the total number of people who spoke. And I believe that 2025, it was 115. So it broke a record. That is hard to do because you have to fit more speakers into a pretty fixed time frame. And if too many people speak more than their 3.5 minutes, you run out of time. There's always people who are ready to speak, who are on the list, who, when the time runs out for the session, they are not able to speak. So if people stay under their 3.5 minutes, then more speakers are able to come up. We move on to the historic live stream from the National Convention. This picture is from my vantage point. We're getting ready. We're going to have a TV show here. The delegates are the audience. Our job is mostly to be quiet. We don't really know what's happening. All are waiting quietly for 4 p.m. Central Time. So while we're waiting, let's introduce our speakers, the members of the National Assembly. You may not know them all. From left to right, Fariba Akhdazi, professor of mechanical engineering at UCLA. Dr. Robert Henderson, who just announced his retirement. He's served on the National Assembly for 43 years. And before that, he was a member of the National Teaching Committee for about 9 years. So his service goes back to the early 1970s. And if you go to Baha'i Wikipedia, you will find that in his younger days in Atlanta, he was a co-founder of Air Atlanta, which is an airline. But he had to step away from that because of his service on the National Assembly. Rabi Musa, professor of chemistry, was in Albany, New York, now is in Louisiana. Muin Afnani, manager for a microelectronics company in California. Safira Rameshfar, she's new, elected in August of 2024 in a by-election when Kevin Trotter stepped down. She was in New York City when she was elected to the National Assembly, and she was part of the Baha'i International Community's representatives to the United Nations. As a result of her election, she moved from New York City to Wilmette and was appointed the Assistant Secretary of the National Assembly, working with Mr. Bowers. Mr. Bowers was on the National Teaching Committee back in the 90s. And when the regional councils were first elected in 1997, shortly thereafter, the National Teaching Committee was dissolved. And shortly after that, Mr. Bowers was elected to the National Assembly. June Thomas, professor of urban planning at the University of Michigan, now emeritus. Nanaba Khan Fogarth, her grandfather was Chester Khan, who was the first indigenous member of the U.S. National Assembly back in the 1960s and 70s. She grew up around the Native American Baha'i Institute in Arizona. Dr. David Young is a practicing dermatologist in Oregon. He came to national visibility 25 or so years ago when he put out a video training program for teaching Christians. They're about ready to speak. They have assignments. Friba will have the opening prayer. Dr. Henderson will give the welcome and vision of hope. Dr. Musa, an evolving dream. Mr. Afnani, the processes of integration and disintegration. Ms. Rameshwar, the role of religion. Mr. Bowers, vision of unity. Ms. Thomas, our collective story and role of youth. Ms. Fogarth, consultation and cooperation. And David Young memorably recites the closing prayer for America. It becomes 4 p.m. and the broadcast takes place as planned. And as soon as it's over, there's an eruption of applause in the room. Those of us in the studio audience only heard the words of the National Assembly members. We were not even aware of the additional content until seeing the recording days later. So that's just my testimony from the audience. There were 2,000 viewers on live stream. Once it was placed on YouTube, there were 14,000 views in 2 weeks. Anyone, the public, yourself, can watch or share this video by going to youtube.com and searching for A Common Endeavor. We know from the earlier discussion that the script was crafted to try to use words and terminology that would be understandable to the public. Now to the teller's report. Here it is. Delegates eligible, 171. 164 voted in person, 7 absentee. Every delegate voted. There was 1 invalid ballot and 7 invalid votes. So the total number of valid votes was this number, 1523. And those elected, the top 9, 8 are familiar to you. We just named them. Dr. Henderson had retired, and the new member of the National Assembly is Timothy Connolly. He received 23 votes. I did a little analysis. I added up the numbers in this column of the top 9. It's 963. I subtracted that number from 1523, the total number of votes cast. That means that 560 votes were for other people. That's interesting as the convention searches for its new member. Potentially 100 different names or more could be in that tail. That's how the process works. The introduction of the newly elected National Spiritual Assembly. Here they are. We'll introduce them again. June Thomas, David Young, who was elected the chair, Safira Rameshwar, who was again appointed Assistant Secretary, Ken Bowers, reelected as Secretary, Fariba Akdazi, Muin Afnani, now the new treasurer of the National Assembly, Rabbi Musa, again elected Vice Chair, Nanaba Khan Fogarth, and the newly elected member, Timothy Connolly. He was a professional athlete, a professional football player. He's also a youth minister with his church, and he has a lot of talents that were part of that youth ministry that he brings with him to the National Assembly. He is from the Los Angeles area and was elected to the Los Angeles Local Spiritual Assembly 3 or 4 years ago when they implemented what is called the 2-tier election process, a new methodology that comes from the House of Justice for communities that have 400 or more members. And the Los Angeles community has, I think, around 3,000 members in that local jurisdiction. Historically, they reelected the same people over and over, but the two-tier process changed that dynamic. And a lot of new people were elected to the local assembly of Los Angeles, and Mr. Connolly was one of them. And he was then also elected as a delegate. We look forward to hearing more about him and more from him. Retirement of Dr. Robert C. Henderson. After 43 years of service on the National Assembly, beginning in 1982, service on the National Teaching Committee from the early 70s, one of the greatest Baha'i orators, loving friend, role model. There were tributes from 5 members of the National Assembly. I caught 3 of them here, and they tended to agree. He is a friend, he is a mentor to many. He always sticks with principles. In consultation, he doesn't let on which way he is leaning and is always ready to change his mind. I'm going to play a 3-minute video of Dr. Henderson telling about his grandmother becoming a Baha'i in 1937, and he refers to Counselor Hearn's suggestion that we study letters from the House of Justice as a flow of divine blessings.
Thinking about the text of the Universal House of Justice, and Sonia, I've got to tell you that as you were explaining that, first of all, I was thrilled, but I was thinking about my grandparents, and I was thinking about my grandmother in particular, who became a Baha'i in 1937. And that, that was a big deal to do for a black woman in 1937, because the church was everything. It was the centerpiece of every aspect of your life. And when the National Spiritual Assembly would send a letter from Shoghi Effendi or a letter from Horace Holly, my grandfather had bought a copy of Webster's Third International Dictionary because he had heard that that was the dictionary Shoghi Effendi used. And when those letters would come, they would sit up all night and look up the words that the guardian had used so that they could arrive at a precise understanding of what the sign of God on earth wanted them to do. And I think to myself that this is exactly the point that you were making, that our secretary was calling us to a new level of depth of understanding so that we wouldn't simply see these letters as another thing to read in the blitz storm of correspondence that we receive from day to day, but we would see these as a series of communications from those institutions that were created by Baha'u'llah to direct and canalize the flow of divine blessings from heaven to us. So these things are not minor matters.
Dr. Henderson's wife and adult daughter were present. This picture of Woohoo may have something to do with Dr. Henderson being more available for travel and family time. Dr. Henderson has shifted his mode of service and stepped away from his role as a long-standing member of the National Spiritual Assembly. We might ask, what's next? There was no hint that I saw. I think he does have his own private consulting company. We assume that there will be lots of options. Presentation on Hukukula. The presenter is Dr. Bill Wheaties, member of the International Hukukula Board of Trustees. This board was established in 2005, 20 years ago. It oversees 33 regional boards of trustees and a worldwide network of more than 1,000 Hukukula representatives. He begins with this quote, "Say, O people, the first duty is to recognize the one true God, magnified be his glory. The second is to show forth constancy in his cause. And after these, one's duty is to purify one's riches and earthly possessions according to that which is prescribed by God." From Baha'u'llah. Dr. Wheaties has been a member of this board of trustees long enough that he has noticed some trends. First, greatly increased collaboration with boards of counselors and national spiritual assemblies, beginning to see the same thing with regional Baha'i councils. The presentation on Hukukla is always part of the agenda for the National Convention, and that could be true in other forums also. Second, increased educational endeavors, penetration of the law into the hearts of the friends. Third, increased vitality, application of the law in personal lives. Fourth, increased diversity in the 1,000 representatives worldwide. And fifth, increased number of friends making payments. And he mentions doubling the number of payments in a short time, and I don't recall the story that goes with that. Additional observations. He talks about the profound impact of this law on the Baha'i community and the transformation of society. Vast majority of funds available to the House of Justice come from the Hukukla. This sacred law creates a direct and vital link between the individual believer and the head of the faith. A quote from the House of Justice: "It is love for Baha'u'llah which will be the primary motive for the friends in obeying this law." He says, please don't reduce this law to a simple set of computations. The mescals of gold, figuring that part out. It's that plus much more. He says, observing this law is an indispensable discipline, protection against the forces of materialism. You come to understand what is enough in your life. And once you know what is enough, then if there's more, then it's more than enough. He says, many places in the world, the friends will never be above the threshold to pay the hukukala, yet they do. The March 19th, 2025 letter, just a few months ago, from the House of Justice on family life, he quotes from it. And I'm going to read, attention to financial affairs is an essential aspect of a coherent and flourishing family life and of the involvement of the family in a burgeoning community. Consultation between the wife and husband and with children as appropriate will determine how this material concern is to be balanced with the many other features and obligations of family life. Wise and attentive stewardship of family finances must take into account many considerations, including how money is earned, spent, and saved, how the education and well-being of the children are maintained, how much is to be allocated for the funds of the faith or to support community affairs, and how to discharge the obligation of hukukala, done in consultation with the family. In responding to these and other such questions, the family provides a space to learn and practice about generosity, responsibility, the difference between needs and wants, and the management of material means. On to Sunday. Sunday is short. There is the live link with the Canadian National Convention. Didn't know about that, did you? And the lightning round, where you get 30 seconds to comment about the convention. You can say, I like the tacos, or it was too cold, or whatever, and the convention closes at noon. Canadian National Convention, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada, was formed in 2025. Did you know that? In 1948, the Joint Assembly was dissolved. The United States and Canada then both elected their own independent national spiritual assemblies. This live link celebrated the 100th anniversary of the establishment of that joint national spiritual assembly. So on the video, they are watching us. You see them with the screen in front of them of the U.S. National Convention. There I am in there. And we are watching them sitting at their little tables. We don't have little tables. So what's the program? Well, there's greetings and 2 prayers from each side. A native Canadian says a Baha'i prayer, an English prayer from the U.S., a French prayer from Canada, and the same prayer in Spanish from the U.S. There was a clear mutual affection and common sense of purpose. The U.S. delegates sending their greetings to Canada. That's what it looks like on our end, and on their end, it's probably a TV screen. So Dr. Henderson later mentioned that funds from the U.S. go all over, and one of our contributions was $100,000 for construction of the Maestral Oscar of Canada that was recently announced by the House of Justice. And I will point out that you can help. There is a pull down in the online contribution system for us to personally contribute to construction of the Canadian Temple. And please do, it is our privilege. 3 slides on delegate highlights. We've heard from everybody else. How about the delegates? So these are just highlights that stuck out to me. There was a medical doctor inviting patients and staff to weekly firesides. Used to be monthly, now they're weekly. He says receptivity is unreal. And this is in Loudoun County, Virginia. There were many accounts of learning trips to Brazil, to the Portal da Gloria cluster arranged by the counselors, learning trips. Like, what did you learn? One example, listening to them tell their stories, it seemed to be about focusing locally and engaging daily, intensity. Another example, the process of learning has given rise to strategies and actions adaptable in every setting. This was a story about study circles in the fields with those working. So the tutors were trying to start study circles, and many people didn't have time for the study circles because they had to work in the fields a lot. So the tutors came up with this approach where they would go to the fields with the workers, and in preparation for the study circle, they would memorize the material for that session. So when they were in the fields, they could share the RUHI materials from memory. That worked in that setting. So that was a learning. The bottom half here is a paragraph from the letter the delegates wrote to the House of Justice. It begins, delegates were deeply moved when one of our Indigenous American brothers shared a heartfelt account of pain and isolation from the field of action. An outpouring of prayers, love, and support filled the room, followed by a spontaneous moment of silence. So the story here was that one of the indigenous Baha'is who had served at the Native American Baha'i Institute, NABI, in Arizona, had, with his wife, arisen to homefront pioneer to a community in western Arizona of indigenous people. They wanted to teach the faith to other indigenous people. So they moved from Houck, Arizona west, and they were quite isolated in this community of indigenous people. And over time, and they've been there, I think, 3 years, they have felt isolated because they were used to lots of activities at the NABI, and now they're hundreds of miles away. And this got a lot of attention because it resonated. I'll read the next part here. This powerful moment echoed another key theme raised during consultation, the challenges faced by believers in isolated centers, the longing of smaller localities to connect with the learnings of more advanced clusters, and the need to apply insights to diverse local realities. And so I'll connect that with another thought that somebody said about travel teachers and home visits help friends not feel alone. And that is something that is more and more called for. Baha'i involvement in the aftermath of the fires in Los Angeles. Here's Los Angeles. You remember on the TV a few months ago, Palisades fires, Woodley fire, Hearst fire, Eaton fire. Delegate Stephen Licata was from the Altadena, Pasadena area, the Eaton fire. This blow-up shows in red the homes that were completely destroyed. He is going to speak.
My unit contains Pasadena and Altadena, which were the victims of the Eaton Canyon wildfire. And that was a wake-up call, but it also reminds me of the importance of obedience to the covenant, because youth, many years ago, in Pasadena, Altadena, identified areas where they could be absorbed with all the core activities. And in the Eaton Canyon fire and its immediate aftermath, there was a part of the response that got overlooked but the Baha'is were in a position to help. We all know that when the fires came, immediately there's a big flood of, food and clothes and even toys for the kids. But there's also a subset of the population that couldn't evacuate. The house didn't necessarily burn down, but it became uninhabitable. The Baha'is of Pasadena and Altadena, through the many years of relationships, found out, for instance, that what people really needed, those who were stuck and left behind, needed air purifiers. So the Baha'is of Northern and Southern California got together and very quickly purchased about 60 air purifiers and got them into the homes that needed it. Another thing that's interesting about that area, it's very diverse, and my wife is from Peru, she's the Latina. In that neighborhood, as you know on the news, evacuation, and then the National Guard came in to watch intersections in certain neighborhoods to prevent looting. In the Hispanic community, in the sort of closed loop of social media, there's a lot of misinformation. And a lot of these families who wanted to evacuate or tried to were being told that all those troops are ICE agents. Immigration just waiting for them to step out of their house. So you had men not going to work, women not going to work, not going to the grocery stores, and the kids not going to class. The Baha'is were the only group, apparently, that was trusted because of our long-term commitment. We were able to step in, look into things, get back, and relieve people's misapprehension because the social media was not doing it. Another thing is about the children whose schools burned down or became uninhabitable. The Baha'is for many years have been renting a block of storefronts in a very high-need area, and they didn't call it a Baha'i Center. It says, this is for the neighborhood, just for the neighborhood. And the rent doubled in the last few years, and the Regional Baha'i Council says, should we hang in there? Yes, they did. When the schools burned down, all those kids needed tutoring. They're falling further and further behind. The Baha'is opened that up.
More comments. Shift in consciousness from number of activities to society building impact. Somebody said the Milestone 3 cluster goals are very challenging. Engaging youth can speed up the advances. Someone said some activities are being led by the community of interest. Their learning will accelerate other areas. Charlotte, North Carolina now has core activities in a private school run by the Nation of Islam. These 4 have to do with studying guidance. Look for spaces to study guidance out in the community. The Los Angeles Assembly studies guidance every other meeting. This has made them more efficient. The delegate explained with an analogy. She said that she had assembled an IKEA table with her sister, and they learned that all sisters, meaning both of them, need to have read the instructions. And once both of them read the instructions, they assembled the IKEA table better. It was more efficient. So the interpretation is that the Los Angeles Assembly, if everyone has studied guidance, they will come to their conclusions more efficiently. Someone else said they were trying to connect those in their cluster with sources of guidance. Another, that they went around to core activities and found people that wanted to study guidance, including Friends of the Faith, and they were using language understandable by the public. Somebody said that the American Baha'i stories are now written in a way the public can appreciate. Now, I didn't know that, but that's material we have at our fingertips for bringing to home visits. Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program in the public school in Triangle, North Carolina. At the bottom is North Carolina, and the square is where this map is. The triangle is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. So here's Raleigh, and there's Durham, and here's Chapel Hill on the map. The triangle cluster now has 900 activities with 3,000 to 4,000 participants, and it's often referred to as the most advanced cluster in the United States. When Kathy Lee from Durham speaks, she will refer to Chapelboro, which is the Chapel Hill Carrboro school system in this area. And she will refer to the Culbreth Middle School, which is the red circle, and the Triangle Baha'i Training Institute, which is a Baha'i-owned facility, which is the red square. So, Kathy, take it away.
After an anti-Semitic incident in one of the Chapelboro public schools, an interfaith task force was created by consulting multiple community organizations, including faith organizations. The NAACP nominated a Baha'i to serve on the Interfaith Task Force. After gaining perspectives from several of the faith leaders, a gathering of 12 educators was hosted at the Triangle Baha'i Training Institute, where an intimate conversation occurred about how the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program is contributing to the moral development of middle schoolers. While they may not have many Baha'i students in their classes, they do have many of their students who are already enrolled in the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program, citing 80% of Hispanic newcomers, that is 150 students, are in the Junior Youth Program at Culbreth Middle School. The leader of the Interfaith Task Force was so impressed that she informed the superintendent of schools, who invited her entire staff to attend a second gathering at the Training Institute, where they learned how the Junior Youth Program fosters the elimination of racial prejudice. A third gathering at the Training Institute then followed, with a larger number of educators plus community workers, occurring where they learned about, in the last 3 years, in the public schools of Chapel Borough, during the summer camps, the junior youth and children's curriculum materials are integrated 1 hour each day, Monday through Thursdays, but nothing on Fridays because they don't have the camps on Fridays. So the Baha'is offered to do a full day program every Friday during the summer camp. And the school officials have now decided they want the teachers to be trained on how to use both the children's class materials and the junior youth spiritual empowerment materials. And friends, this is also happening in a second school system in Cary, North Carolina, which is also part of the Triangle, and discussions are underway in a third public school system in Orange County, which is part of the Triangle cluster.
The last page of highlights. One delegate reads Shoghi Effendi's World Order of Baha'u'llah every year. It helps train his responses to world events so that when he speaks in public, the public will learn from that. Cluster has done a series of Dawnbreaker intensives for youth. The youth read the entire book. This experience, they have found, provides confirmation for some youth. It is transformational for some youth. They've done it twice, and they're going to do it more. The California region has a program to facilitate youth serving a year of service. The delegates suggest that each region do this or move to California and help them. This topic was discussed a lot, the need for guidance to raise deputization funds for youth who want to serve full-time. And as several people spoke about it, you could see that it was complex. Who can give, who manages the funds, and what if the youth are undocumented? An increasing number of students have no friends. You read about that in the media. Animators raised up kids from this condition. We've experienced that ourselves here. How do you meet people? This delegate encourages participation in Black History Month activities in your locality. Adults can join the NAACP. Youth on campus can join the Black Student Union. A delegate from Ohio states that their Meaningful Conversations program is now swamped, that's an unusual word, swamped with people. This last point amplifies that. The delegate says, I'd like to learn more about the social media campaign. It's not in the annual report. Mr. Bowers goes to the microphone and says, there are 78 teams, which is the Meaningful Conversations, in the U.S. We have been careful not to publicize because the capacities of the Baha'is need to be developed. We have to develop the ability to interact with these people who come from the social media advertisements in person. So far, the content comes from national. Next step is local development of content. There's a lot going on there with the social media campaign. Someone said this, and it really stuck in my mind. Baha'i culture, treading a path of service. American culture, independence. Each one teach one, and accompany two. Now, I think that might be a company 22, because once you teach someone, they're going to be part of your family forever. Give a shout out to Alphonse Nicholas, the delegate from Unit 25. He lives in Woodbridge, Virginia. It goes all the way down to Richmond. He was there for the first time, and he really fit in. He was just everywhere. So if you want to find the articles, video, and audio from the National Convention, you go to www.baha'i.us, you log in, you find the 117th Convention banner, and you click on coverage. You will find all these articles and all these videos and the link to the couple hundred Flickr pictures and the National Assembly's printed report download as PDF, and the other 20 audio tracks. I played 2 of them for you. Hopefully you felt like you were there.